A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
And today we are talking all things education. We will focus on homeschooling, but we'll talk about education in a broader sense as well. Homeschooling grew in significant numbers in all Australian states and territories during the COVID-19 pandemic. So the question must be asked, will this upward trend be sustained in the years ahead, or was it merely a good option during COVID? Is homeschooling going to become the new norm for parents who seek to shield their children from the negative impacts of cultural Marxism that has invaded modern education in Australia? Our special guest today, Dr. Terry Harding, is one of the pioneers of both homeschooling and non-government distant education in Australia. He has been influential in the development of both forms of education and has been the manager of Australian Christian homeschooling for 25 years. Dr. Harding continues to inform both state and federal governments concerning homeschooling and non-government distant education as they develop policy for both of these modes of education. And Dr. Harding, I want to welcome you to 2020 today.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Great to be here.
It's great to have you in the studio. It's we are in Southeast Queensland and it is a wet old day today. But Dr. Harding, I want to ask you, recent research is indicating that more and more people are choosing homeschooling. The stats back this up as well. Why do you think more parents in Australia are choosing to educate their kids in a homeschool environment?
Well, that reflects my research coming out of 2022, and I found that there were 6 major reasons for people choosing homeschooling. And the research looked at people who had chosen homeschooling before COVID and those who had looked at homeschooling during and post-COVID time. But the answer to your question is, firstly, home educators had great concerns about government policies. They broke the 2 areas of government policy into the issues of the new philosophies that were being introduced right across the country in government schools. And secondly, they had concern about government policies regarding the health of their kids. And that was connected to the COVID policies that were mandated around the country. Then there was the concern, secondly, with the school environment. Now, homeschoolers are not about banging schools or talking down schools, but the individuals who had responded to this research had great concerns about the school environment in terms of child safety and the quality of education. So they were what I called push factors which basically were pushing children and their parents out of our schooling system in Australia. Now, the schooling system in Australia is one of the best in the world. Why were these parents being pushed out? Well, the reasons were the government policies and, secondly, the problems with the school environment. There were a few other reasons which I call pull factors that pulled families and their kids into homeschooling. One was the strengths of the home as an educational environment, a place of safety, a place where kids could work at their own strength, their own rate, etc., etc. Secondly, there was the role of the parent. They were saying, hey, we're the parents, we're responsible. If our children fail in the education system, that's a problem. We only get one shot at this. We'll take the responsibility as parents of our own children. And finally, the other reason they were pulling children out of schools was that they had real concerns for the special needs of their child. In Australian Christian homeschooling, we have children who are movie stars, we have children who are sports stars, we have children who are average learners, and we have children who are massively challenged as learner. So covering all of that, we found that our group had seen a lot of growth over the COVID period.
And I think, isn't the stat about 62% increase in the last 4 or 5 years now in Australia? 62% increase in homeschooling. That is a massive stat, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's not an accurate stat too, Andrew. I did the original research of the growth of homeschooling in every state and territory in Australia. Now, the only true numbers you can see and reflect upon are the numbers of homeschoolers who register with the government groups. there are a lot of unregistered homeschoolers. So currently, my research indicated that over a period of 5 years, nationally, homeschooling grew at 110%.
Wow, that's
So
big.
It's massive.
Now, when you say unregistered with the government, what does that look like? A family literally just engage with an overseas homeschooling organisation and just start teaching their kids? Like, how can you be unregistered with the government?
Well, firstly, to explain registration, in each state and territory, homeschooling is legal, and the Education Acts provide for the registration of a homeschool child with their state or territorial government. And so the child is registered, and thus they're declared to not be truant, that's helpful. Many homeschoolers like that. Other homeschoolers say, no, it's not the business of the government of what books my kids read, etc., etc. So they choose, quite rightly, they'll choose to not be registered. So it's almost, you could estimate how many non-registered homeschoolers are out there. It could be as many as are registered. So the last research I did, I found that there were 42,000 registered homeschoolers across all states and territories. And if you doubled that, and we can't be sure how many that really is, it's a lot of kids.
It is a lot of kids. It's really interesting. And to our listeners today, you may not have kids who are in school right now, school-age kids, but you might have family members with children in school age, or you might be about to become a grandparent, or you might have a neighbour or a friend. You may be in a church and there's kids in your church. I think this is a really important conversation we're going to have today, and we will open up the talkback lines in about 10 minutes or so. But Dr. Harding, you did mention there's a few government policies and decisions that kind of are concerning parents, making them want to get their kids out of the state-run education system. What would 2 or 3 of those major policies or decisions be that are really upsetting parents?
Yes, well, I'll quote the parents who responded to my survey. Government policies involved a lot of philosophical issues. I'll quote one father who said, radical gender theory, critical race theory, and leftist woke political agenda was one of the reasons we left. Another one said, zero trust in government education. Racial and sexual education materials are blasphemies. Others said constant pushing of government agendas against the will of parents. So there's that feeling that parents are not being listened to, and there was a contrary set of values to their family values.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a parent. I've got 3 kids who all went through, a state-run primary school and then a private high school. But you don't have to look very far, do you, to see the modern curriculum for children is no longer just maths, English, science, history, maybe a bit of science, biology or something in there. There are so many other items in the curriculum, aren't there, especially for young children, like climate change and gender and sexuality. And as a parent, I used to think, why are my kids learning this stuff at such a young age? And you look at the stats for Australia's educational outcomes compared to the rest of the world, and we're not very high up on the list, are we? In other words, we're failing our kids in traditional subjects such as maths, English, science, etc., but we seem to be loading them up with knowledge about climate change and gender theory and all this stuff. So have you got a comment about that?
Certainly. Well, anyone who saw any news items this morning would see the massive discussion across the nation with regard to NAPLAN results. And largely they're saying that 1/3 of Aussie kids fall below the standards for literacy and numeracy.
Wow. Say that again. One third of Australian children fall below the standards for literacy and numeracy.
That's correct. And given that over the last decade, we've spent over $79 billion, and often the unions are saying we need more money, and nervous politicians say, yes, we'll give you more money. It's not fixing the problem. Other examples are the international test as well. The Progress in International Reading Literacy Study, it's called the PEARL study, where it's been going since 2003 and it examines 15-year-olds in 76 countries. And we're down from 11th in the world to 29th in maths, 8th in the world to 16th now in science, and 4th in the world to 16th in literacy. And similarly with the Program International Student Assessment, which is called the PISA exam, again it's international, 79 countries, and our last PISA we had 14,000 of our 15-year-olds, and again low scores, 29th in maths, 17th in science, and 16th in reading in one of the wealthiest countries in the world.
Yeah. So when we were fourth in the world for literacy, how many years ago was that?
It covers from 2003.
So in 2003, we were fourth in the world for literacy.
And we've dropped, yep.
And we've dropped down to 16th, was it now?
Yeah, let me see. Yep.
I'm pretty sure you said, I mean, that is a big drop in just 20, 25 years. So we are failing our children, aren't we? And I'm saying the state government education departments and the federal government of Australia are actually failing our kids, aren't we? Because all this money, like you said, is being poured in and we're not getting the outcomes.
That's correct. There are problems in our education system. However, that can be fixed. But I think that the problem with the education system is not to throw more money at schools or classes. It's to fix the universities, where students around the country are doing a Bachelor of Education. And if you look at Dr. Abrera's research into what's happening in the Bachelor of Education courses around the nation, the amount of woke subjects that are being pushed out on our kids in university and the lack of literacy and numeracy training. That's a problem. A teacher should be taught about how to teach the reading of the English language. That's what they're there for, particularly primary. But the problem we have in the country is if the kids don't learn in primary, the poor old high school teachers are still stuck with high school students who cannot read well.
Yeah, so you've opened up a can of worms there. So you're saying that the problem actually starts at university level. So what, obviously, as you said, there's a lot of wokeism in our modern universities across the world, not just Australia. You see it in America, all these movements in the American universities, these pro-Palestine, anti-Israel movements, students sitting in. But in Australia, what is the issue at university level which is affecting our children's education? Just spell it out for us.
Well, it's teacher training. Largely it's teacher training. And I think that the evidence is now starting to show that if you teach teachers how to teach, and secondly, how to teach reading, which is a different thing, that produces results. And we've seen some good results in some Christian schools around the nation. However, what has to happen is national change in the universities to teach the teachers how to teach explicit instruction, explicit direct instruction, and direct instruction. Now,
so hang on. So you're saying at university level now, young people who are going to study to be teachers are not really being taught how to teach properly?
Correct.
Why is that, Doc? How does that happen?
Well, the problem started 30 to 40 years ago when leftists actually colonised the universities with their own philosophies, and largely, just keeping to the science of reading, largely they went to a point which they decided that reading was a natural thing and that kids should pick it up like they picked up how to speak the English language. However, reading is not a natural thing, and particularly in our language, it's all about sounds. There are essentially 35 basic sounds in the English language, 15 more advanced sounds. That needs to be taught explicitly to the child. If that's done, the child, over a period of 6 to 8 months, can easily be taught to read, and that's what we do in Australian Christian homeschooling.
Yep.
If you teach requiring kids to memorise words and picture words, that forces massive pressure on the child's memory when it doesn't need to be. Why would you have to memorise the word cat instead of memorising a couple of sounds and memorising those sounds k, a, t? Put those together and you've got the word. So the issue is a huge difference in the teaching techniques.
Wow, so they've gone away from traditional techniques and traditional understanding because, I mean, even the Bible talks about, doesn't it, that we should teach our kids and we should read the Bible to our kids. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 7, it says, "You shall teach your children diligently, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house." Talk of them being the word of God, the words of God. "You shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up." So God actually said, didn't he, to families, teach kids by speaking the word to them. And that is really the traditional model of teaching, isn't it? And you're saying we moved away from that about 30 years ago.
Indeed. Yeah. However, happily, it's coming back. The words direct instruction, explicit direct instruction now appear in the political documents. People bandy these things around. What we need now is university teachers who know how to use this and know how to teach kids who are coming out of our universities. But you've just quoted the mantra for homeschooling. It's talking about the word being in the parent, not the child. It's got to be in the parent, and then the parent teaches the word of God to the kids those 4 times during the day, when they're rising, when they're going to bed, when they're walking by the way, and sitting down.
Yeah.
So
it's really interesting because obviously Jewish families, and we will open up talkback lines really shortly, and I'd love for people to call in. Maybe you disagree with Dr. Harding and I. Maybe you think education in Australia is great and they're kicking goals and the government, billions of dollars is actually achieving outcomes, or maybe you've got real issues with education. Maybe you disagree with homeschooling because you don't think it's good for children, or maybe you think it's the most amazing thing. We would love you to join the conversation today. But Dr. Harding, one thing I've observed throughout history is that Jewish families did teach their children the first 6 books of the Bible, starting in Genesis. And they say the average Jewish child traditionally could quote all of those 6 books by the age of 12. They knew them off by heart. And I just think the development in their brains was so amazing because of that. You look at the stats worldwide. I mean, Jewish people in most nations like Australia, maybe 2%, maybe 1% of the population. They usually make up 20% of the billionaires in every nation they're in. Their thinking just seems so much more advanced. Their creativity, their ability to grasp concepts. And I believe that's because they were taught the scriptures through the parents teaching them and other people speaking it to them, and just the development of their brain by listening and learning through reading and also by hearing God's way. And it obviously does something wonderful to the human brain, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Not only that, it's what has held the Jewish culture and the religion together since the year dot. The Romans are no longer here. That's disappeared. The Egyptian cultures have disappeared. But the Jewish culture has largely been held together despite being spread across the planet.
Heavily persecuted.
Yeah, genocides, all of this. And the mantra you quoted, which is Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 5 to 7, is the essence of what has held them together. And so with the children having learned the things of God over a period, they know, number 1, to love God, and number 2, to love people. They've learned that, and they have held together within that culture.
Absolutely, but it's the hearing and the learning and the memorizing through what they hear and what they read as well, isn't it? Which I believe develop their brains. Even just take God out of the equation. If it was just a book, and it's not just a book, it's the Word of God, but imagine if it was just a book. I just think that learning the way they learnt by people speaking to them and they memorizing the scriptures and reading them for themselves, it obviously develops our brain. I think in America, in 1890, I think most children in America could read and write simply because they went to Sunday school and they were taught the Bible in Sunday school. And then you look at America in the next 50, 60 years, it becomes an economic powerhouse. And I believe because the children's brains were developed through reading and writing, through literacy and numeracy, and so they could grasp concepts, they could come with ideas, they could be creative, and America's now still the richest country in the world, and it all goes back to their children in 1890 being able to read and write thanks to Bible teaching in Sunday school.
Indeed, and this is a blessing from God, and it's His way. Parents are to know God and to love people, and they're to teach the Word of God on a daily basis, regularly, in a disciplined manner.
Amen. Well, you know what, Dr. Harding, I would love to open up the talkback lines now and ask our listeners, have you got some thoughts on education? Are you happy with modern education in Australia? Are you disillusioned? Have you got a child in homeschool now and it's done wonders for your child, or are you against homeschooling? There's no right or wrong today. We would love to hear from you. The talkback lines are open now and you can call us. And we do have another caller waiting, but we're going to have to go to the news in about a minute's time. So, Matthew, I'm going to quickly go to you to make your comment for Dr. Harding, and he'll give you a response after the news. Are you got a comment or a question today, Matthew?
Just a comment. Thanks, Dr. Harding and Andrew. We took our kids out of the Christian school because of the gender issue. And, at the time, Kurt Cameron had a little video about the homeschool awakening, and we felt that God was speaking to us to just challenge what people have been trying to carry into the school, and it was a massive influence for us to go the way we're going.
Yeah, and really enjoying the calls today too. And I want to open up the talk lines again on 1-800-316-316. Are you happy with modern education in Australia, or are you unhappy with modern education in Australia? Have you ever thought about homeschooling your kids, or have you done that, or have someone you've known done that? And what are your reactions to that? What's been your experience? Now, Matthew called in from the York Peninsula in South Australia, and we're going to go back to him now. Matthew, you still there?
Yeah, I am.
So tell us, so you did choose to homeschool your kids. What's been your experience?
We were not happy with the school's direction as far as the policies coming in, and we spoke up, but it doesn't seem like it's going to change.
Yep. So you made a decision. How many children have you got?
4 young kids.
So they're all in primary school still?
Yeah, so aging from 9 to 3.
Oh, wow. That's a busy time for you guys, huh?
Yeah, it was a bit of a change, having them home all the time. But, my wife's really good at, teaching the kids, and we've got some good curriculum resources. Way of the Master.
Yep. Dr. Harding, are you familiar with the Way of the Master curriculum?
Yes, there's some great curriculum resources out there. And so good on you, Matthew, and having that Christian influence it is a big change. Now, the national curriculum was brought in by Julia Gillard in 2003, and now we're up to version 9, would you believe, Matthew? Version 9, they keep changing it, but what we're stuck with from a Christian point of view is it opens the gate for, number one, materialism, that everything that matters is material, and maybe that's dollars, but there is no God. There's no spiritual. Marxism, relativism, there is no truth. And we're stuck with things like that, philosophies like that in our schools. And then, of course, you've got the identity politics of race and gender and sexual behaviour and promiscuity, confusing the kids. Further, you've got the black armband history, trying to make our kids feel guilty for things that they have not done, and critical race theory and radical green ideology. I could go on for ages, but I understand your concerns with regard to the policies and philosophies that have impacted our schools nationally.
Yeah, they seem to, the Christian schools, especially ours, want government funding, and they've got to appease the government in what the government put forward in their policies, so they're adopting their policies in the Christian schools, we're just we spoke up, but I think we're going to have to keep writing letters. But yeah, we found that homeschooling it's a great way to bring up your kids and teach them about God and the Bible and educate because you got the ratio is. Well, I come in occasionally because we're on the farm, but 4 kids to 1 teacher instead of 1 teacher to 30 kids. You can suit your teaching to their needs, really.
Yeah, you can't beat those numbers, one-on-one education, and that's what my wife and I did with our 5 children many years ago in home educating our kids. And we started off like you did. People said, why are you doing this crazy thing? And we said, well, we're Christian people and we want to have Christian education, Christian curriculum for our kids. But after about a year of doing it, we changed our story. We still remain as Christians and we still use Christian curriculum. But we said that we're doing this for deeper relationships, intimacy with our kids. Now our kids are in their 40s and we still have that deep relationship. I'm not saying that other Aussies can't have that relationship, but the homeschools have tapped into the secret of time. We have a lot of time and a lot of flexibility to educate our kids. And so you are out there, Matthew, doing it, and it's a blessing. Enjoy it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other families around now, and they catch up every Friday to, see other kids and and we're in sports and things, so they, get a lot of contact with other kids, but you've sort of got that, the kids are at school for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, so that's a lot of time that other people get to, sow into their life, and you don't know what they're sowing into it, really.
Indeed, and I can take your numbers further. They are in that situation for 13 years of their life, and I'm not knocking it, but if it's not done well, you end up paying a price. And as I was saying earlier, 30% of those children, or up to year 9, are not performing at the correct level in literacy and numeracy. So that's an issue.
Yeah, amazing. Hey, Matthew, we've got lots of other people calling in, but what a great story you've got there. And I'm just so happy for you that you guys have found a really sweet spot for your family, and that your 4 kids are at home with your wife on the farm there, and they're being educated and bringing, faith and the Lord into that as well. And they're involved in sport and social activity. It's a great story, Matthew. And Matthew is from the York Peninsula in South Australia. And I want to thank you so much for calling 2020 today, Matthew.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Dr. Harris.
God bless, mate. Have a super day.
Thanks,
and we've got
Matthew.
another caller waiting who's been very patient. It's Greg from Blacktown in New South Wales. Are you there, Greg?
Yeah, it's good morning.
You got a comment or a question today?
Both. It's well, first of all, I want to comment on your comment about.
Sorry, Greg, we just lost you there, mate. Just repeat that one.
With that change in 2000 Julia Gillard brought in a national curriculum, was it?
That's correct. 2003, Greg.
Okay,
Yeah.
you don't have to be precise, but
Yeah.
so with that, I got it was a negative comments that you're making, that it's taken away certain, true orientation to Christian views, and I think you said it was more could be like Marxism aligned.
Correct.
Well,
Yeah.
I thought it was a good idea. Like, if you move from Brisbane to Perth, well, at least you're not going to miss out because we're all on the same page. It's a national, the plan, the schedule is nationalised, but I didn't realise it's had the goodness taken out of it.
Well, certainly. But look, I've got to be very clear here that, because I've been principal of 5 schools as well, the national curriculum is broad enough for Christians to operate quality Christian schools. So be very clear on that one. But as I've said earlier, it's also so broad that activists have colonised that national curriculum. And as I said, it brings in materialism, relativism, identity politics, sexual confusion, making our kids feel guilty.
Well, with the colonisation, could you sort of also term that as infiltration?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Universities.
So isn't there some sort of scrutiny to why the people watching that, what they're going to be presenting is acceptable? But obviously it's not with the wokeism. And you can't LGBTQI, you can't, you cannot degrade their objectives.
Brilliant statement, Greg. Brilliant. And he uses the key word scrutiny. Who's allowing this into a curriculum which shapes our children nationally? Good question. You would hope there'd be good scrutiny, but at the moment, it's using your word, it's infiltrated our universities and our education bureaucracies nationally.
Oh, I guess, yeah. Well, it's like the like that big steam train that someone's keeps the coals on the fire until you can pour water over the coals. That train's going to keep on rolling. It's almost a runaway train.
Well, indeed, and I think the only answer to it is that people who are concerned need to speak the truth. Need to speak the truth, not to be bombastic or unkind, but to speak the truth about the issues of life, and that everything's not material, everything's not relative. There are absolutes. There are, and our history, need to look at that carefully, not just use it to create an ideology. So good on you. Yes, speak the truth.
Well, I've been seeing this on TV, elderly woman in China, northwest China, poor as dirt, but she had the biggest smile on her face. I don't know her educational background, but she's collecting like sandalwood, and she's just happy, just be working in the creator's domain. And that's what I think, homeschooling, how does a person go, just say, for example, we want to make a homeschool for the local children around the area? That would have to go through government.
And that's a really good question, Greg. Yeah, so Terry, how would someone who's not yet in a homeschooling environment with their children, what is the practical steps you've got to do to get your kids in homeschooling?
It varies from state to state and territory-wise. The big issue that parents see that there is a need, and then they can start homeschooling themselves, just purchase curriculum and start. They may then choose to register with a government authority. Many do, many don't. From the Australian Christian homeschooling point of view, we take a specific pathway, and that is every child that comes into Australian Christian homeschooling, we check them and diagnose them with an online test in the parent's home on maths, English, reading and spelling, and then we place them in Christian curriculum at their correct success learning level, rather than just saying, hey, you're 8 years old, you'll be in year 3. So a child could be strong in maths, so that 8-year-old could be doing year 5 maths, but weak in reading and doing year 2 reading. We put them where they can perform. So that's the way we do it. But you just get started either with a group like Australian Christian Homeschooling, or you just do it yourself, and then you purchase your curriculum and away you go. And you will find, as I think Greg and their earlier comments, parents have said, there are groups in your area that you can socialise with and have fellowship with.
Yeah. And Greg, I want to thank you so much for calling 2020 today, all the way from Blacktown, Sydney, New South Wales. And just to remind our listeners, we now have a digital signal across Sydney. People can listen to Vision via the digital signal, and we always love getting our Sydney callers. So, Greg, thank you so much for calling. But there's other people waiting in the queue, but we really appreciate you calling today.
Okay, thank you.
God bless you, mate. And we've got another caller from WA this time, Terry, and it is Shannon from Western Australia. Shannon, are you there?
Yes.
You got a comment or a question today?
Yeah, the way I've got 2 young kids in primary school, and just looking at kind of the I guess, social and political climate at the moment, you're sort of seeing, wokeism and all the rest of it coming through. And it seems to me a perfect storm, because you've got that happening. You've also got even Christian private schools which have government funding. It seems to be inevitable that we're not going to be able to teach. And I know Australian Christian Lobby often talk about protections for Christian schools being able to teach our view and not having staff in who don't, follow those same beliefs. And I just wanted to know Terry's thoughts on Martin Isles. They're creating the homeschooling curriculum. Do you think that is how far off? I know you can't pinpoint it, but just that perfect storm of people having to kind of on a mass level homeschool their kids and withdraw them from even Christian private schools for that reason. And what do you think of the Martin Isles plan to create that homeschooling curriculum?
Well, thank you, Shannon. What a wonderful question. I'm all for the growth of the development of Christian curriculum worldwide. And, of course, that is going to be growing as the need arises. And people like yourself who wake up to what's happening in a lot of educational circles, they're going to need good Christian curriculum. It's teaching the things of God, the Word of God, and Christian character development, as well as quality education. Remember, this is an education context as well. So quality theology, quality education go hand in hand. And so I'm all for it. And the more, the better. But you said, it's going to become a growing factor. Too late. It's already growing, and I'm really pleased about that.
Yeah, I know over here in WA during COVID, they had such a massive amount of, new registrations happening, people just sort of seeing what's happening and pulling their kids out of school, and that not wanting their kids to have the vaccination or have to wear masks at school, and that was really concerning. So I respect parents' right to choose what's best for their kids. And I don't know if this happened in all states, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but in WA, the government actually withdrew the amount of the staff who kind of facilitate the homeschooling kind of registry in WA. They actually reduced the amount of staff that were available to help, and it was happening because of the amount of new families registering to homeschool. It was almost like they were trying to deter it from happening by pulling back the,
I understand.
human resources.
Look, in West Australia, over the period of 2018 to 2022, you guys grew by 73% over a 5-year period, and that's just the registered kids. The children in WA who are not registered for homeschooling, we do not know how many there are. And so if the government wants to register children and it's growing at that rate, they really do need to lift their game, don't they?
Yeah, well, it's looking like they are not, for their own reasons, wanting to encourage that, like that's sort of the general, it's the message that they're putting across. When you're pulling staff away from helping, facilitate all these new families, you instead of increasing staff, you're pulling them back as it's growing. Do you think that's going to be difficult in the future for families with that government pushback?
Look, I think that families who wish to line up and get their children registered, it'll be a wait. For example, I know last year in New South Wales, the wait was 18 weeks for families who were signing up with NESA, that's the New South Wales Authority, and till they got their registration. So, that'll be a problem, but other families who don't register won't worry about it. But the danger for the government authority in WA is if they drag the chain too long, that may give families incentive to not register with them. So it's working against them to have fewer staff. But nonetheless, whether you're registered or not registered, those families are entering into educational flexibility, and if they're doing Christian, they're growing their kids in God.
Yeah, and I think that's so great and so important that all families that want to homeschool, but especially like for Christian families to have the resources. And as time goes on, there needs to be the infrastructure and there needs to be the support and help for families that, yes, like open arms, we can help you, we can support you like you guys are doing, and helping families who are in, some really difficult circumstances.
Well, Australian Christian Homeschooling, we love to help people, and people ring up from all of the states and territories with different issues. Every family is different. They've all got problems or incentives for starting homeschooling, and we love to help them.
Thank you so much.
Well, Shannon, we want to thank you for calling in all the way from WA today. You raised some really interesting points. I think, Shannon, we need to remember too, every state government in Australia, I think except Tasmania, is Labor Greens, and they tend to be more for government control of every area of our lives, if you want me to generalise, but especially education. Yeah. I don't think in their heart of hearts they trust individuals like you and I to educate our kids. They want to control the education of our kids. So, you can push back politically as well and maybe try and get some change there. People like yourself just voicing your concerns about that. But Shannon, thank you so much for calling in today, and you're always welcome to call us again on 2020.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. And Kate has been very patient. Kate is from Townsville in Queensland. Kate, have you got a question or a comment today?
I've got more of a comment, Andrew, just wanting to, I've got 4 children, 3 of whom are still in the school system, and they were blessed enough to for them to attend an independent Christian school. I suppose my input is just that even with that protection, which I'm very thankful for, there's still a lot of difficulties in the system, just more so from the curriculum point of view. I've got neurodivergent children, so they have got to the stage at different points that they've actually disengaged a lot from learning because of the pressure on them and stuff. And that's obviously without the wokeness and all that other stuff that's creeping into a lot of secular schools. But as the previous caller mentioned, even there's obviously Christian schools are under a lot of pressure for their freedoms. It's something, homeschooling is something I very much would love to do, just due to family circumstances that's not possible. But I've got a lot of Christian friends who do actually homeschool and they're in that space and they just rave about it because it does give them that autonomy and independence, but also that connection with their children over that 30 plus hours a week.
Yes, well, certainly, Kate. There are many folk with neurodivergent children who are electing to homeschool. And the flexibility gives the parent the ability to meet some of those needs. So too with disengaged teens who are disengaged from learning, and parents are pulling them out of school systems. And again, I just want to be clear, we're not knocking schooling here. We're just saying when parents see an issue, they take the authority of being the parent, the authority that God gave them. So it's a good thing.
Wonderful. And Kate, I want to thank you calling in from Townsville today. There's one more caller waiting, but we really appreciate you being part of 2020 today.
Thank you for having this important conversation.
Good on you, Kate. And we got Joe from Adelaide who's been so patient. Joe, thank you for calling. Have you got a comment or a question today?
I've got a comment. I've got two daughters, so I'm not a 30-year-old myself. I've got two daughters that are in their mid-40s, so who went through the school system. And then I've got two children in their early 30s who went through homeschooling for 10 years. And now we have two teenage special needs girls that are not ACHS by birth, and so we have to answer to the Department for Child Protection, and they have to go to school. What I've noticed is that the difference between mid-40-year-olds and these teenagers is the standard of education seems to have broadened, but not focused. And even in their special needs disability units, these two girls are learning all the woke information. And, if you want to change your gender, you can. And it's very difficult. These in the disability units, it's interesting there's not one child that's transgender, because I think they've got enough problems of their own without trying to change gender as well. And they're very black and white children generally and don't like the idea of change. And I just wish I could go back to homeschooling, but that's not possible, because I remember homeschooling, it was not just school, it's a way of life. It's a lifestyle, and it's such an easy lifestyle. And I believe that every child is ready to be homeschooled, but not maybe every parent is ready to homeschool, but they should be.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah. It's interesting too. Look, just to make clear that you can register a child for homeschooling in South Australia. It's a two-step process with the government and a school. But certainly lots of children with disabilities are being helped for their individual needs through homeschooling.
And Joe, I want to thank you so much for calling in today. We do need to move on. We've got to wrap this show up today. But what a wonderful segment today, and some really good callers, including yours, Joe, from Adelaide in South Australia. Thanks for calling 2020 today.
Thank you.
Well, Dr. Terry Harding, what a joy this has been. So many interesting callers and so many people obviously interested in this space as well. But I just want to remind our listeners that you can be contacted. You are from the Australian Christian Homeschooling Organisation, and your website is achs.edu.au. That's the Australian Christian Homeschooling Organisation, and the website is achs.edu.au. Dr. Terry Harding, I want to thank you so much for joining us on 2020 today.
Thanks, Andrew. It's been great to be here and to hear the calls. In summary, again, we're not knocking schooling, and especially not knocking good Christian schooling. But if you have a problem, homeschooling is there for you. ACHS is there for you. And here's my final statement is, if you have a problem in education, save your children's hearts.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.